Okay.
Hi, this is Kathleen Wilcox. I'm here with Alexandra Bond. We're talking through 4 of her amazing wines with Hector Wine. So take it away, Alex. I can't wait to hear more.
Thanks. So we're going to start with an iconic wine from the Finger Lakes, which is dry Riesling. And this is our 2018 vintage, which was a really typical cool climate vintage for the Finger Lakes. We saw some cooler temperatures, a fair amount of rainfall. In fact, it was probably one of the more challenging vintages we've ever experienced in my 10 years in the business, but also in my partner's grandfather, who's in his 80s, who's been doing this his whole life. But what it does is it shows sort of how much integrity we have and how much resilience we have, because we were able to produce some really beautiful wines from the vintage. So doing everything by hand in the vineyard, hand picking it all, leaving a lot on the vine, and then doing a second sort manually at the winery, so that only the best fruit came in. So we saw lower yields, of course, but really beautiful fruit and really indicative of a cool climate vintage. So this is a bone dry Riesling with a lot of character, a lot of fruit, 2018 vintage again. And this is, of course, the wine, the grape that the Finger Lakes is most well known for.
Absolutely. And it's beautiful. It is so dry. I love it. And I really love a dry Riesling. And I'm getting a lot of fruit. What are some of the tasting notes that you typically see here?
What I love about Finger Lakes dry Rieslings is the minerality. So, we were chatting earlier about how everything is grown on shale. Now we have all these layers of shale that formed when the lakes were formed through glaciation. And so I think that really comes through in the wine. There's this great balance of minerality and fruit. We get that sort of like Meyer lemon balm. I always get some floral notes too. This one to me is even a little bit herbal, sort of like chamomile.
Yeah.
And a little, maybe a hint of tropical fruit as well. A little bit of stone fruit, apricot is pretty typical with our Rieslings.
Yes, and I'm getting almost like a honeysuckle. There is definitely a floral. It's really, really delicious. It's complex.
Yeah, so the honeysuckle, that's, we do allow for small amounts of botrytis, noble rot, when we're sorting. So maybe 30 to 40%, depending on the vintage, of really good, healthy botrytis. And I think it lends to that honey quality, even though the wine is completely bone dry.
So interesting. I love it when you find that balance. It's great.
Yeah, really great at the table too.
I'm excited to try the dried rosé too. It's such a beautiful color. I don't know. Hopefully the camera captures it. It's really,
Yes.
I'd love to hear more. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, so this is made from 100% Cabernet Franc. We only make a small amount of rosé, so it's typically just available in the height of summer, June, July, maybe into August, and then we sell out. We do it in the Saignée method. So we bleed off from the Cab Franc and then make its own wine. I really love the color. Some vintages, you lose a lot of color when you start filtering. This wine, it kept its vibrancy the whole time. So I'm really, really happy with it. I also think that when you do Saignée method, you get a little bit more body, a little more fleshiness. So it's got that refreshing, strawberry sort of typical rosé note, but then some great texture as well.
Absolutely. And I love the Cab Franc rosés that I've been trying recently. They're so dry, but they're so lively. And like you said, you get that strawberry. It's really
and I think a little floral in here too, like African violet, which is like some people might be more familiar with. It's almost like when you have a watermelon Jolly Rancher.
Yeah.
Do you know that smell? The leaves actually smelled exactly like African violet when we first racked it, and we keep everything on the leaves right up until preparation for bottling, and that helps lend to the mouthfeel as well.
That's great. And how many bottles of this in the Riesling do you make, or cases, whatever's easiest?
We only made about 150 cases of this.
Okay.
Limited production. It just came out last month, but we're already pretty close to being through it. So it goes really, like I said, quite quickly in the summertime.
That's great. And what about the Riesling? How much do you make of that?
Depending on the vintage, this particular, the 2018 was maybe 200 cases, 225, I think.
Okay.
So a little bit more, but still pretty small production.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And did you, because you've been with the company, Hector, for a long time, did you introduce any new wines, or have you guys been kind of producing a lot of these the whole time?
A lot of them we've been producing the whole time, but the rosé, actually I introduced in the 2016 vintage. We always wanted, Justin and I, you know, my head winemaker, we always wanted to make rosé. We talked about it for many years, but we didn't really have the tank space. It just didn't come together. And then in 2016, I was getting ready to get married the following year, and I needed to have rosé on tap at my wedding.
Absolutely.
So I found a small tank, just started in, and we just made, we only released 50 cases that year. But I put a little bit of it in kegs for the wedding, and did it in the Senier method, so very similar to this one. And we've been making it the same way ever since.
That's great.
Yeah. Some years are different though. You know, that first year, it was only on the skins for about 10 hours. And then the last 2 years, because, you know, we bleed off the juice once we get that color that we really like. The last 2 years, it's taken us a few days to get to that color. So skin contact time varies a lot, and that really speaks to the vintage variation that we have in the Finger Lakes.
Absolutely. How's this year looking for you guys?
This year, you know, it's still a bit early. What happens now is going to have a huge impact, but we've had basically a drought year. Which is not always a terrible thing for the Finger Lakes. You know, we don't mind a bit of that dry weather, that hot, dry weather. It becomes an issue when it's too early and the vines kind of shut down. But we did luckily get the rain that we desperately needed last week.
Good.
Everything's growing really beautifully now, and hopefully it'll stay as hot as it's been. It probably will be an early vintage if it stays this way. We've had really, really above average hot days in the 90s. I think it's going to get up to 100 today. But, you know, our vines, they have deep roots. They can find the water. We did plant some baby vines this year. Those we've had to water, so it's been a bit challenging. Typically, you don't have to do that in a normal vintage in the Finger Lakes. We usually get plenty of rain, but this year is a bit different. So I think it'll be reminiscent for those who are familiar with Finger Lakes vintages of years like 2016, 2012, 2010, 07. These were some really hot, dry years that gave us some sort of like bigger, bolder, riper red wines from the area.
That's great. And which red do you want to taste now?
Let's do the Cab Franc first.
Great.
So again, you know, like the Riesling, which was also 2018, this is a very typical cool climate representation of our Cab Franc. So we make it in large format barrels because we love the fruit of Cab Franc. We really want it to express itself. We don't want to damp it down with too much new oak, too much influence. Our style is sort of to shepherd the wines into being. And so we feel like we can get great expression from the Cab Franc by using these large format barrels. So 500 liter puncheon instead of a standard 225 liter barrel.
Okay.
And it goes into the bottle unfined, unfiltered. Another great way for us to express our terroir in our vineyard site. So yeah, these red wines from 2018, to me, just they have so much energy. I'd rather use terms like that than specific tasting notes because I think that they're more indicative of our style. So really, they're just delightful red wines. They have a lot of energy. They're sort of electric. They have that bright acid. But then this one has some depth too. So some nice red fruit and a little bit of spice.
You don't get that greenness that you get with Cab Franc sometimes. It's really, it's very, is it 100% Cab Franc?
It's 100% Cab Franc. I think our site, you know, being where it is on the southeast side of Seneca, we are in this really warm microclimate. They refer to it as the banana belt. So we get optimal ripeness here. We also don't overcrop. So I think that those things have a huge impact on the fact that we don't get those green notes. Maybe some herbaceousness, but nothing vegetal. And that's why we started making Cab Franc in 2013 as a varietal bottling. Before that, we were harvesting it, but we were always blending it. And that was when we sort of determined the style of Cab Franc we wanted to make, and realized how beautiful the Cab Franc was from our site, which was planted in 1990. So these are some older vines.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, these are beautiful. This is delicious. And you could definitely put this on ice for a few minutes in the, in the summer and have a nice.
Yeah, or just chill it down a bit. That's what I've been doing.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean ice cubes.
Yeah, yeah. Chilling it down to, 58 or 60 cellar temp is quite lovely.
Yeah.
And, I think Cab Franc is arguably the red grape of the Finger Lakes.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, so some great examples out there, but definitely really special from our site.
And now this one I'm really excited to try, the blend.
So I wanted to have some diversity in our tasting, and this is a totally different kind of wine, different style wine. This is actually our flagship red. It's called Essence. It's a Bordeaux style blend. So this one is, it's Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, and Merlot, but 50% Cab Sauv. So typically we're at either equal parts each year, or we're Cab Sauv heavy, like in this particular vintage.
Got it.
This is from 2017, which was a great year, in my opinion, for red wines, because even though we had sort of a late start in the spring and the summer was a bit cooler than usual, the fall was gorgeous. So really warm, really dry. We were able to leave things hanging for longer than we might normally. So we didn't pick the cabs until the first week of November.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we were able to get those long hang times, and we got really optimal ripeness. Plus, we used a bit more new oak in this wine. We use French, American, and Hungarian barrels. We only work with the best cooperages, but about 40% is new oak in the essence, and so it gives a bit more tannin structure. These wines age really beautifully too.
How long would you give them in the cellar?
Oh, so we just opened some 2010s because this is our 10th anniversary year, and they're gorgeous. And so, yeah, I think, that's as far back as we can go, sure. But I think that these have the potential to age for 5, 10, maybe even 15, 20 years.
That's great.
All the time will tell. But yeah, doing everything by hand, I think, helps with that. We're only having really healthy fruit go into the wine. Plus, in the Finger Lakes, in a cool climate, you have that higher acid. Check the wine.
This is just so round. I love the texture.
Yeah, this is our big, bold blend. Again, this is our flagship red. So this is sort of the wine we make first in the cellar. So as long as we have enough great Cab Sauv barrels or great Cab Franc barrels, great Merlot barrels, we can make both a varietal bottling of those grapes and the essence, but the essence comes first. So essentially our best barrels go into this blend.
Got it. Okay. And how many of these do you make, and how many of the Cab Franc?
So depending again on the vintage, essence is typically between like 225 and 500 cases each year. The 17 we made 325 cases.
Okay.
Cab Franc in 18 we made 250 cases of, which was pretty impressive considering we had the low yields that year. But we did get enough Cab Franc to make a, a substantial amount. Although substantial depending on who you talk to, because those are still pretty small numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you get? What notes do you get with this? And what kind of sensations do you get?
With Essence, I get more, like a bit more depth. So there's like, it's more dark fruit. The Cab Franc was like the bright red fruit. The Essence is more like blackberry, a little bit of pepperiness, some earthiness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really full bodied, especially for the Finger Lakes.
That's exactly it. Yeah, the texture and the body is very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these are 4 wines that I think really represent well what we do, but we do make some other very special wines like a Syrah, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Blanc, things that are a bit more obscure in the Finger Lakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm so glad. Hopefully, I'll be able to meet you in person soon, but I really appreciate your time, and the wines are beautiful, so thank you.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you too.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.